I picked up a couple of these hardcover notebooks that I'm going to use to do all of my future project sketches in. And it's looking a little plain, so let's make a nice stamped leather cover for it. The leather I'm using for this project is natural tooling leather from American Leather Direct. I'm using two different weights. For the main piece, I'm using a 6 to 7 ounce, so that's about a 2.8 millimeter to 3 millimeter thick piece. And for the inside pockets, I'm using a much thinner piece, so this is 2 to 3 ounces, which is roughly 0.8 millimeters to 1 millimeter thick. Nothing crazy when it comes to the pattern. It's just two rectangle pieces. If you want the dimensions for these pieces, they will be listed in the blog post for this project. I went ahead and cut out all three pieces for the project, and you can see here how the layout will look once it's all done. All right, so the first step was to score a series of lines on the outside edge, which will be the boundary for my border stamp. I went with a 8 millimeter gap. I decided to make the panel design for both sides to be about 135 millimeters wide, and I got this number just by kind of guesstimating and measuring the notebook. Now that I have a measurement on all three sides, I can go ahead and connect these lines to create the border for the inside closest to the spine. I did this for both panels. The stamp I'm using is from a generic beginner's leather crafting stamping tool set, and it's the basket weave just because it's the only one I recognize. And these two border stamps I ordered specifically for this, and they are a corner stamp as well as the running pattern that goes between the corners. After wetting the leather, I start with my corner stamp in all four corners. I gave it a couple good whacks, but it didn't leave a really deep impression. Next, it's time to fill in the border space between the corners. I think out of the entire project, this is where I struggled the most. Even though I had a nice scribed line to follow all the way from end to end, I still had trouble placing this stamp in the correct sequence to make the pattern look seamless. If you were off by like a half a millimeter, it looked really bad. So I don't know if it's just the stamp that I bought or I'm not good enough at this yet. Okay, so now it's time to fill the panels in with the basket weave pattern. What I'm doing here is just scribing a line from corner to corner just to give a nice even starting point for my basket weave. Now following that line I marked, I just alternate all the way down to the other corner. I filled in the bottom half. I think I did an okay job. I was a little confused at what you're supposed to do once you approach the border, so I kind of just faded it as well as I can. So let's continue and just finish up the rest of this piece. And we're all done the first panel. Now a quick detour before I start the second panel. I want to address the emblem. I didn't have any good ideas for the emblem design off the top of my head, so I just Googled free Celtic knot SVG file, downloaded that, added a border to it, and now I just laser engraved it straight onto the leather. Here you can see I'm just placing the emblem in the position I want it, and then I do a quick trace around it just so I know where to put it when I'm gluing it down. I started stamping the exact same way I did the other side, however this time I made a massive mistake. You can see as I was approaching the center area where that emblem was going to be glued down, I thought I could save some time just by skipping over the entire middle section. And this probably would have worked fine if the emblem space was taking up the entire width of the panel. However, as you can see, the stamp will go beyond the emblem and it needs to be on that exact straight line that I already started, otherwise the stamps aren't going to align correctly. And you can see there the problem I created for myself. Next time, I'm just going to go straight lines all the way through end to end, and I will worry about the things that go on top of it at the very end. Lesson learned. Now it's time to dye all these pieces. The dye I'm using for this project is the light brown 5-inks Pro dye. The dye effect I'm going for with this is kind of like an old-timey book that's been sitting in a trunk for a long time, so I'm doing just one layer and then hoping that some of that marbling comes through. Some of the light areas where the dye didn't penetrate as much will shine through some of the darker layers. And can't forget that emblem, gotta dye that one too. And after letting that dry for a little bit and giving it a nice buff with a microfiber cloth, this is what my result looks like. And I'm loving it so far. This is exactly what I was going for. Next up, I'm going to add some 5-inks antiquing finish to hopefully give it some depth. I chose the dark brown color, however, in retrospect, I wish I would have selected black. I think it would have given it more contrast than it did. Basically, this stuff is going to get stuck in all those little nooks and crannies of the stamps and of the laser engraved areas on the emblem, and then it'll get wiped off the top surface, so it kind of leaves a darker area in the recessed parts and then a lighter area on the top. Now it's time to attach the emblem to the front cover. First, I'm going to do that by just scuffing up that area that I marked earlier, applying some leathercraft glue, gluing it down, and then I'm going to hand stitch it to secure it to the cover. All right, moving along. Now it's time to put on the protective finish for the cover. I'm going to be using this neutral leather balm with atom wax. I don't know a whole lot about finishes because I don't do a lot of dye work, but I've always used this one for my dyeing projects and I've never had any problems. I like the way it looks. It has like a real hard, waxy finish, and I think that goes perfect with the aesthetic that I'm going for here. And here's what all of our pieces look like so far. I have the cover and the 2 inside panels. Now it's time to stitch on those inside pockets. To finish the edges, I go through and hit both sides with my edge beveler, some black dye to dye the edge, and then I burnish it with Tokonol. All right, let's take a look at our finished notebook cover. Here's the outside, front and back. Here's what the inside looks like. And let's throw one of our notebooks in here. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how this project turned out. I wasn't exactly sure what the end was going to look like, but it is basically what I envisioned going in. As far as the good things, I like how the dye job came out. That is exactly what I was looking to accomplish with that. And on the stamping front, I probably just should have watched a couple Don Gonzalez videos before I went ahead and did this. But it is my first stamping project, so I learned a lot, and I will be able to apply all the stuff that I learned to the future projects. Thanks for watching.